Alright, we're going to be looking at the Boards of Canada song called Happy Cycling. We're not going to look at the musical elements as much, we're mostly going to be looking at the mix and percussive elements. Okay, the first thing is a devious pause. Alright, so listen to this. Did you hear the pause? Here, I'll show you where it's at. So, the pause is not here in this first section, but it is here. And more specifically, it's right here. So see if you can hear it. I'll play it again. So that's a very small pause right there, and it leaves room for a percussive element that comes in later in the song that I'll show you. But also, the pause itself acts as a type of percussion on its own. So I'll let it play for a second so you can continue to hear that pause, and I'll try to highlight it as it goes through it. Now you can start to hear the percussion that comes in that fills that little gap. So I'll keep it playing and you can hear how the space where that pause is now is starting to be filled by a percussive sound. It's that dun-dun-dun right here. So that is the sound that starts to fill that space. It's a really small thing, but it really does add a lot of groove. And there's a lot of things like that with Boards of Canada. It's actually sometimes difficult to articulate exactly what you're hearing because so many of the things they do with their music is so subtle. It's very fine detail. Once 31 seconds comes around, and from 31 seconds to 38 seconds, you can hear that the beat and the percussive elements start to drift a little bit to the left channel. Play a little segment right before 31 seconds hits, and then you can hear from 31, which is where I'm going to highlight, to 38, you'll hear it drift to the left. It doesn't go completely to the left, but it shifts more to the left than it is in the center. There's also this drum fill that happens that sounds like it's more in the center of the mix and doesn't drift to the left with the rest of the percussion elements. I'll play a sample of it so you can hear it right here. It's that little part. It sounds like it's more in the center than the percussive elements that go to the left. That may be a psychoacoustic thing, but I think that it actually is a little bit more towards the center than the rest of the elements. This just points to something that Boards of Canada does really well, which is creating space for all the sounds in the stereo field. I love listening to their mixes because everything really does have its own space in the mix, not just on the frequency spectrum, but also in the stereo field. And they do a lot of asymmetrical type mixes where, like in this case, the percussion is more to the left than the center. And then later on in the song, there's a bass that comes in that's actually more to the right than the center. Boards of Canada will play sounds in all different parts of the stereo field, and they will move it around the stereo field as the song goes, which is really cool. Another thing that I think is worth pointing out is the contrast between the bare beat for the first 38 seconds of the song compared to when the eerie synth slash like choral sound starts coming in at 38 seconds. When you get that intro of no synth sounds or no super musical sounds and you're just hearing the beat, once those synths do come in, they just sound really rich and they really permeate the mix. You can feel them permeating the song. I'll play the moment those come in, and it's right here at 38 seconds. They really just kind of like splash in a subtle way, but it's very vivid. Okay, another element that has to be mentioned, which is one of the more easy elements to detect, is the sound of the seagull. What you'll hear is that the seagull sound begins in the middle and then starts to drift to the left. It's interesting the way that it drifts like that, but probably more interesting than the way it's drifting in the stereo field is the way that the seagull sound kind of rides the beat and creates a rhythm on top of it. So I'll play the first moment where the seagull comes in. Here, I'll play it one more time. And it does that several more times throughout the song. And if you can listen with headphones, you'll hear how it starts to drift to the left as that seagull sample plays. Okay, so another element that sticks out to me in this song is this really rich, expressive, kind of morphing bass sound that happens. Here's an example of it from 132 to 136 where I have it highlighted. It's just such an interesting, rich sound, really expressive in the way that it goes up and down in volume, but also in pitch. And it sounds like there's a couple of different layers in there where it's almost like bass frequencies harmonizing. It's just such an interesting, dynamic sound, and it's really powerful. If you ever listen to this in a car or a subwoofer or something that can pick up on those frequencies, it really comes in really strong. For some reason, it sounds organic to me, or creature-like almost. It has like a biological feel almost, even though it's very electronic sounding. Another really interesting moment is when the song shifts into its kind of second section. So there's a lot that changes in this transition to the second section, but a small but really interesting thing I wanted to point out is how there's a louder hi-hat that seems to get introduced, or at least pushed up in volume during this section, that really makes the beat kind of hit in a more groovy way. So I'll play a section right before it transitions, and you can hear during this section, especially when you listen to the song fully, you'll hear all of it up until this point, and then once you hear the change in the beat right around here, you can tell that the beat is just groovier and kind of hits harder. If you listen to the hi-hats and the snare, you'll really hear that they're hitting much harder, and it really creates a more groovy, kind of aggressive feel to the beat for this second section. So the last thing I'll mention has to do with this last section of the song. Basically, the beat gets taken away, and there's a few elements that remain that are mostly like synth elements. And it's really nice after listening to the whole song and hearing the percussion and the beat go for this entire time. It's really nice to be able to hear at the end the beat gone, and you get to hear this bass line and a bunch of other sounds too, but specifically I'll point out the bass line and how rich it is when you get to hear it isolated without any of the louder percussive elements on top. I think this bass sound is a synth and not a bass guitar. It's just really rich sounding. It's just a really nice, warm, analog sound. And if you're wearing headphones while you listen, you'll hear the bass sound a little bit more in the right channel than in the center. So that's just a quick run through of some of the elements that stick out to me when I'm listening to Boards of Canada Happy Cycling. I think after watching this, if you go and listen, you'll probably hear and pick up on some of these elements as you listen. And you'll probably hear a lot of others because there are a ton of others. I didn't even get into all the musical aspects of it. And there's a ton of other really subtle things that happen that are honestly kind of hard to talk about because they're so detailed, but they're there. So go listen for yourself, and I'd love to hear anything that stands out to you when you listen. There really is so much going on in Boards of Canada songs. There's a lot to pick up on.